You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caporelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. So today's question is a variation on a theme that we have answered before on the show, but I think with a little bit of a different twist, which is why I wanted to feature this particular version. So the question is, Dear Strategy, what are the risks of being a follower to a competitor or of being a game changer? So really interesting. And again, we have talked about this idea of being a follower or a fast follower and kind of defined that in the past. But we didn't really talk about the risk profile of one strategy versus another. And so I really wanted to kind of talk to that a little bit. So just to avoid you having to go back to previous episodes, if you haven't listened to every episode or absorbed every single word that we've said here on this show, let's talk about a little bit about what these definitions are. So first of all, when we talk about being a follower, now I want to clarify because a lot of people will mix up the term being a fast follower with being a me too, right? And they are actually two different strategies that I think for the purpose of this question, we're going to group similarly, but I want to at least define what they are. So when we talk about being a me too product, we're talking about really being a company that is playing in a commodity world, right? So you have usually a mature product that's been out there a long time. There's a lot of different variations on that product, and it's been well studied, let's just say. And you decide to get into a field that's already pretty mature and pretty established. And maybe you have a little bit of a variation on whatever it is that you're trying to release. But for the most part, your product is just like everybody else's, maybe with some minor differences. Obviously, there's going to be some differentiating factor that you have to have in order to get people to buy your product over others. But for the most part, you're entering a very mature market with a pretty mature product, and maybe just a little bit of a small variation on that. That's the definition of a Me Too. And most of the time, Me Too products are not demanding, price premiums or things like that, because there's a lot of different choices. So that's one version of being a follower. The second version of being a follower, though, is what we call a fast follower. And that's where somebody comes into the marketplace just after the game changer, just after the breakthrough provider. And what they do is they allow somebody else to do all the research, development, all the hard work, right? And then they improve on the things that didn't resonate with the market when that game changer came out with their product. So a good example of this is always the iPad, right? I like using the iPad as an example because it's very, very well known. But the iPad was definitely a breakthrough product when it was released. But very soon after the iPad was released, Samsung and other tablet manufacturers as well came out with a version of their own tablet that improved upon some of the things that people didn't like about the iPad, right? So the inability of the product to play flash files, or the inability to have external memory, or things of that nature. So there were improvements on the product that were made right away. Okay. So what happens is that those companies like Samsung could take advantage of the breakthrough product that Apple released, but improve upon it just enough to carve out their own niche in the marketplace. So that's different than a Me Too, because you are improving it, you are making it something different, but more importantly, you're doing it right after the breakthrough product was released. So you don't have to spend all that research money, but you can take advantage of this trend in the marketplace that's been established. And you could also make sure that the product was successful to some extent before you invest any time or money in it. Okay, so that's kind of the follower category as regards this question. Now, of course, when you get to the breakthrough category, you're talking about somebody who's completely disrupted a market, completely, created a new product that's never been seen before. And so I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so now let's get back to the question. What are the risks of being one versus the other? Well, you might say that being a follower is not risky, right? Because it's already established in the marketplace. You've already seen that there's success there. So if you put out your version, then it's not going to be risky. And I will say from a financial standpoint, that's probably correct to some extent, that you're clearly not taking as much financial risk as you are for the breakthrough type product that you really are putting into an untested marketplace. But there's definitely still risk in being a follower. And some of the risks are that you really don't know how big the market is, right? So you're taking some educated guesses on that, but you really don't know. So if you're kind of being a fast follower, you don't know if there's enough of a market for you to have a place in there as well. You're also taking a risk in as much as price, because you think that you're going to be able to demand a certain price for something. But if you're already entering into a saturated market, whether you're a fast follower or you're a Me Too, you may not be able to demand anywhere near the price that you think you can demand, because another player in the marketplace is sure to bring prices down, right? You're also taking a risk in that you do still have to have some differentiated factor for people to buy your product over somebody else's. And the differentiation can come in a lot of different ways. It can come in price, it can come in placement, it can come in some type of the product, come in brand, it could come in the way you promote it or advertise it. So any of the marketing mix elements can be differentiated to some extent. But you do have to have that differentiation, and you don't know if your brand of differentiation is actually going to resonate with people. So you definitely can put out a Me Too product or a fast follower product and have it be a complete failure. Now, the good news is you're probably not going to spend as much money on that as you would if you were coming out with a breakthrough product, because the breakthrough products obviously require a lot of R&D spend and a lot of upfront research that costs a lot of money. So you might not risk that amount, but you are going to still have some risk. Now, when you're a game changer, obviously the risks on the financial side are greater, right? Because you are going into a completely untested market, and it's very expensive to do that. You have to spend a lot of money on research, on promotion, on all of those other things, and you don't know if it's going to be a hit in the marketplace or not. So clearly the risk profile from a financial standpoint is very great if you are a game changer versus if you are a follower. But financial risk is not the only type of risk that companies take. And that's the important thing that I want to get across in the answer to this question. Being a follower carries with it other types of risks. The risk that people will always see you as a follower, right? The risk that people will not think that you have any new technology to offer. The risk that you are going to be seen as someone who's not very creative or not very clever in the marketplace. And the risk that your brand is never going to catch up to the person who actually had the breakthrough product. And, we could use Apple as an example of that. They obviously were a breakthrough company. They came out with a lot of breakthrough products and still do. But if you look in recent years, many of their products have been fast followers or even Me Too products, but their reputation is always going to be seen as an innovator, right? Someone who's absolutely breakthrough in the marketplace. And so they gained that position by being initially a breakthrough, and I'm sure they'll do that again with other products and continue to. But for the most part, they're always going to be seen that, even if some of their products are fast followers or some of their products are Me Too's. So if you're known as a fast follower and you're known as a Me Too, it's harder for people to see you as that innovator, right? And will always be harder for people to see you as that innovator. So if you do decide to be a breakthrough innovator someday, it may be hard to gain that position because you've always been seen as a follower. So that's a different type of risk. Maybe that's a reputational risk that you take in being a follower versus a game changer. So it really depends on what your capacity for risk is in both the financial side and the reputational and brand side. And then you have to make some decisions as to what you want to do. Now, I would say that the number of companies that are willing to take the financial risk to be true breakthrough players, like the Googles and the Apples and the Teslas and all the ones that you know of, right? There's handfuls. They're not as common as the followers because following takes less financial risk and does have some payoff. But if you are willing to take that financial risk and really willing to put yourself on the line there from a financial standpoint, and you do have a hit in the marketplace, well, that's going to pay off for a long, long time, both from a financial standpoint, but also from a reputational standpoint. And that's why the breakthrough companies decide to do that, right? Because even though the financial risk up front is greater, the payoff, if it succeeds, is huge. So hopefully that provides a little guidance as to the difference in the risk profiles for being a follower, whether it's a fast follower or whether it's a Me Too type of a product versus a breakthrough type of a provider. And, again, these are things that you have to consider. You have to weigh all of your options. You have to know what kind of financing you have available to you and what kind of risk you're willing to take. And then you go for it. But it's good to ask these questions up front, right? It's good that these questions are being asked up front because it is absolutely part of your strategy. And being a follower versus being a breakthrough provider, two completely different strategies with different risk profiles, different amounts of capital required. And so, the place to ask these questions is right now when you're putting together your strategy. And speaking of which, if you are interested in learning how to put together a strategy, particularly at the product level, the business unit level, or at the marketing level, if you're in charge of a market, vertical market or a marketing function, go out to the new company that I just started, Strategy Generation Company. You can go out to strategygeneration.com and learn about the training programs that we have. Hopefully you'll be interested in taking advantage of that for your company or for yourself. And hopefully we'll see you in one of those training courses. If not, hopefully we'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy, and want to thank you again for joining. And of course, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.